Good.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
Bye. See you.
My name is Maciej Maliszewski. I'm from Warsaw in Poland. I work at K2bots.ai. We are a spin-off of one of the oldest Polish interactive agencies. So our company was doing all sort of websites and stuff like this for last 20 years. And now we are moving towards new technologies like chatbots, voice bots, and so on. I'll start with thanking you for the great opportunity to join you here. It was great to see you and hear you for the last couple of, let's say, minutes, because I joined just like 15 minutes ago. Dustin mentioned we would like to talk about the international perspective of building chatbots. And I would like to start my response with this: that probably you don't know much about Poland, but Poland is a funny country in Europe because many of the large global companies see our local market as a sort of good market for all sort of pilots and proof of concepts and so on. So because we are still within the European Union, but on the other hand, we are a small country. So if everything goes well, that's a maybe good starting point. And if the project is a failure, then probably nobody will care. So what we see is that many international companies make such innovative projects in Poland, and chatbots or voice bots are among them. So often, if a big company wants to try moving into this field, they often try in Poland. So that is actually our perspective, that we often work with large companies to take their first steps in Poland, but in their mind, they actually, from the very beginning, they want to make sure that this is not something we will build, which will be stuck in the Polish language, which in terms of world is a small language, but that can be scaled to other languages. And I would say that this is totally possible as long as the chatbot will scale or will be localized to other markets which are pretty much similar. So let's say the Western countries with our culture are pretty much similar, and then this approach is possible. Slavic languages and Poland among them are pretty difficult languages. So we're notorious for having more exceptions in our language than rules, which makes creating chatbots and voice bots actually more challenging. But this is good for us as bot makers if we start with our language, and then if we go to languages like English or German or Spanish, then actually those languages are better for NLP, for NLU, because those languages are well structured and organized, let's say. So actually going this way is easier, is much easier than going the other way. I would say this border of going international probably becomes a problem if we would move to other cultures. I can imagine that entering, let's say, Asian markets or Arabic world might be a challenge here, but this is just a guess. Maybe you can tell me wrong, but I assume that those languages which are completely different, have completely different, let's say, grammar or structure, can be much more difficult to make our bot, to translate the bot to those languages. Did I manage to answer your question?
Yeah, so the obvious part for a chatbot, and I'm talking more for an enterprise solution where a company has presence in multiple countries all over the world. And one of the obvious points is, well, people sleep and time zones, right? So the chatbot can help us support questions on different time zones. But you kind of touched on something I really wanted to dive into, and that's like cultural differences in language. Like, Being there to answer is point A. Like, great, we can do that, and that's pretty obvious. But how do we answer? How is it different? And let's take Dialogflow, for example, because I know that you're part of the Dialogflow community on Facebook and have more of a presence there. How, and the same would probably apply for multiple builds, whether you're on Rasa or whatever you're building on. What's your approach? Like, are you looking at English first and then expanding? And then how do you expand? Do you create multiple intents, like one intent in English and one intent in Spanish or French or what have you, or what's your strategy?
That's a very good question. So let's start with making it clear, because often the business owners imagine there would be something like translating a chatbot, that we just translate the stuff and it will work. Well, there is some part of truth in this, but we should call it not translating but localizing. Meaning it's not just if we would translate it one-to-one, maybe it would work, but it's not that people simply not only speak different languages, but they think in different ways because of all the cultural stuff, or the way that the business is organized around them, and so on. The law is different. So some things that are obvious in one country are totally not obvious in other country. Let's say in one country, or even in the States, I can imagine in one state people live a totally different life to another state. Let's say East Coast and West Coast. So that's actually, so not translating the chatbot is a challenge, but finding all those other differences that lie deeper are a challenge. And I would say that the solution to this is that first of all, of course, you can have a core set of intents which will work in every language, but then you have to let's say have some redundant excess of intents for each separate market and its specifics. I don't know if I'm clear, if you know what I mean. So so for each, let's say each language, you can have a core of intents which is let's say generic for all of the languages, but you also need to have some extra set of intents precisely for this language, for this market, and so on. That's a good hint I can give you. And to be very honest, like I mentioned, from our experience, we would always start with our language because it's let's say easiest for us, and also because, like I said, our language gives us more challenges than, for example, English. So we would start with designing a chatbot, designing a conversation in our language, and then go to other languages. But that's also, like I said, specifics of the projects we were receiving so far. So that the, let's say, international company would try the whole idea first on our local market, and then if it worked, then they want to move abroad.
Jason, what's your perspective on that from like a conversational design standpoint?
We can hear you, Jason. You're muted.
Jason, sorry, I had a question. I was talking to Yaki. We had a sidebar here. What was the question?
Well, I just wanted to get more of a conversational design perspective on how you would approach a chatbot that has to be developed in 2 or 3 different languages.
It's a huge challenge, and it's one of the most challenging things that we've come across recently with names, even trying to, we have a list of possible names, and it includes hundreds of thousands of names. But then we reached the German market, and we realized that they have nicknames, and they have certain things, certain ways. They call each other by certain things, or they shorten their names. They make them cutesy, or they add things to names. And so you realize that there's this huge challenge of data sets that you don't have for certain things across different cultures. So it's a very, very difficult process to account for. And the names is just one example.
But you have to differentiate between 2 problems. One is the input problem, and one is the response problem. They're 2 different problems.
Do you think that the response
addressed by different tools.
does the response problem take two different categories? One, because I'm envisioning this right now, just text-based, which is challenging enough. Like adding voice on top of that becomes a whole nother layer, right? And you should design differently. Like at least that's what our approach is. Like voice and text are two different. Like,
well, voice can use text if it's written without buttons and only with textual prompts. And it can be translated into voice. There's no problem, really.
But I would say there's a caveat to that, because I think there's a huge difference when you're designing a voice experience versus designing a text experience. When you're designing a text experience, there's a certain set of rules, that are different for the voice experience. I think that's to me, it's a major point.
And Jason, can I ask, because I proposed a thesis, and maybe you know the answer to that, is that well, let's say European languages are pretty much similar in their structure, but what about your language? Is it much different than English, and is it possible at all to have a bilingual a chatbot with the same set of intents?
Good answer. We found that if you use Google Translate and you translate into English, it's okay. The error rate is much smaller than the general error rate of the bot.
Okay.
So it's no problem at all. You just rely on any translation service. You take the input, it will be close enough to be caught by any NLP, NLU in English. As far as the response, same story. If it's written originally in English or in any other language, all you need to do is replace it. And when it comes to the flow is the same in Chinese, in Japanese, in Korean, and in Dutch and in Polish. There's no difference in the flow. There's always the same flow.
Okay. So that's very interesting.
You have to cover both fronts separately.
But there's also an issue here when you're designing for different cultures.
Yeah.
So if you're designing a chatbot that is let's say it's an insurance chatbot. Let's take that example and say we're designing it for the Italian market, and we're designing it for the Polish market, and then one for the Chinese market. The personality of the bot is going to be completely different, because maybe the Chinese one is going to approach them more formally. I don't know, possibly not. The Italian one maybe be more conversational. So there's an issue here across culture of not just the language barriers, but also the actual conversation design, because you have to, and one of the first things that I do when I start out a project is I research who's talking to the bot. What is the audience that is going to be talking to it? And then I try to design an experience that will be tailored to that type of audience. But once you do it at scale, it gets a little tricky, because that same personality for the Chinese chatbot for insurance is going to act differently than the structure might be the same as Yaki mentioned in terms of the logic, but maybe the way you approach it, or maybe the different the way you come into a conversation or out of it. So it's an immense challenge you've undertaken.
Yeah.
It's very
I'm totally with you when it comes to designing personality. So we also love to do the same. And so what you're suggesting in simple words, that it's possible that one chatbot in multiple countries might end up having different personality for each of these countries. We didn't do that, but I guess that's totally reasonable, especially if some countries are more relaxed and some are more strict.
Well, the name will be different, right? The name of the bot will be different.
For example, and also you focused on the topic of personality, but let's stick to the insurance example, and let's be clear: the insurance law is definitely different in different countries. So it's not realistic, it's not feasible to have one set of intents that can be copied and pasted. There might be some core. But definitely, let's say even even if we kept the same personality, even just the legal differences will make us to introduce some.
Yeah, I love it. We did 2 pre-workshops
changes, and to have
Oh, sorry.
Hey, do you want to open it up to questions from the audience? I think we have
just about to ask that.
I just want to say one thing, Masiej. I think before you go to the questions, if you guys don't know about this, he has an amazing group on Facebook, the Dialogue Flow group on Facebook, which is an amazing resource. And Dustin, I think, alluded to it earlier.
Yeah.
If you're using Dialogue Flow, it's an amazing resource. I check there every day. I see the post there. There's an amazing amount of content, and there's a lot to learn there. And I thought you were the admin for a while because you're always.
I am a moderator. I was honored to become a moderator because I really enjoy the idea of this community. Well, we're helping each other for free. I really enjoy the fact that there are people really from all over the world and countries you wouldn't think of. That we see people coming from, let's say, very small developing countries. So this is really great to see. And I don't know, it feels to me like we're, those evangelists who spread the word of how chatbots can be made. And that's actually a great point if we're talking about international chatbots, that there can be one engine, one technology behind it all. And it can work in so many different languages, so many different countries, cultures, and so on. And one more thing is that the world is really balanced in this community, meaning there's not like majority of people are from States or majority are from India. They're really from all over the world. Many people from States, many people from Europe, many people from India, many people from all the Arab world. There are people coming from Africa, from South America, really all over the world. And this is something really inspiring to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there any questions from the audience that?
Yeah, I think he has a question. Ali has a question. Maria asks if you can share a link to the Facebook group.
Sure. We'll just do it. It's called Dialogue Flow Community, so it's not difficult to find. But I will share a link just after we finish our talk.
And Brenda, I see you raising your hand. Just go ahead and ask the question. And Dustin, take it away.
Just got a private message.
Okay.
It's killing us here, Brenda. What's the question?
Drum roll.
Okay, and can you help me if there are any questions coming? They should appear.
Mm-hmm. I see a lot of for the community, so that's good.
So here's one from Felicity. Do you have experience with reusing bots for voice and chat? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. So if I understand this question, you mean one bot that works both on voice chat and live chat, let's say, the
essence of the question is so you have different front ends. You have a messenger front end, for example, SMS, text message, and then you have like voice. To what extent can you reuse bots?
Okay, that's how I understood it. So this idea is behind the dialogue flow itself. So let's say that the dialogue in DNA of the dialogue flow is the concept that you can reuse the same bot or the same agent structure, the structure of intents of entities for multiple channels. And it's easy to say that the biggest difference is between voice channels and text channels, let's say chat channels. I think that one of the most important examples here, if we are building actions for Google, which actually in our market we don't have smart speakers, Google smart speakers at all. So we use a Google Assistant always on our smartphones. So we have both the screen and the voice. So in this case, if you are designing an action on Google, you have to think both about what will appear on the screen, and the experience on the screen should be complete, and you have to design for the voice. So the experience in the voice should also be complete. And as you're probably all familiar with the concept of mobile first when it comes to web design, when it comes to chatbot and voicebot design, you have to be voice first, because voice gives you more limitations. So you have to start designing your bot structure so that it works well for voice, and then it's easier to expand it on for text. In short, voice messages have really to be much shorter. So you might end up having much more complex conversation flow, more intense than you would need to make a chatbot that wouldn't be used for voice. So that's one of the main reasons here. Also, in chatbots, we're not only limited to text, but we have the whole set of rich responses. We have often carousels which can be swiped. We have buttons. We have quick replies or suggestion chips and so on. Often the experience with a chatbot is not only limited to speaking or typing, but it's often limited to clicking actually on predefined buttons. If we go to the sphere of voice, well, we don't have these solutions such as buttons. So you have to use a well-trained NLU so that you really understand your user input. And also you have to guide your user in a different way. So instead of showing a carousel of choices or a few buttons to choose from, you have to speak those, let's say, choices that the user can make here.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And so I'm also adding these questions in the QA section. So if you're one of the attendees and we don't get to your question, I'm sure you could stick around and answer some of them.
Sure.
So
Great.
we'll do that. And Dustin, do you want to pick the last two questions? I'll ask one. You can ask the last.
Yeah. Is the one in the Q&As?
Yeah, I can do that. So I'll get one from Carrie Doyle. This is where user research is different in different languages and cultures is valuable in creating persona profiles. Okay, that's not okay.
So here, let me tackle Laura's real quick. Because this is something so bot copy is for people who don't know, it's a front end interface for websites. We connect with Dialogflow kind of out of the box, but one of the features that we have, I was mentioning it earlier, is we can recognize language settings that's set to your browser. So Laura's question is, when people are talking about multiple languages, are you saying that you can have a bot that can recognize another language and respond in that language? So that's what, if you're in Dialogflow, I'll use that as an example because I know it best. You can set your bot up to speak in multiple different languages. You have to add that language and create the bot accordingly. Now with a front-end tool such as bot copy, it would recognize, okay, the user has their browser settings set to Spanish, go to Dialogflow and look for the Spanish build. And that's the part that's a little bit tricky with these bot builds, because that's one, it takes time. You have to build it out in English, and then you have to look and recreate it in Spanish. Sure, you can use Google Translator or other tools that are available and just translate the whole thing. And you have a decent agent, and that's a good kind of first step. But actually having to do that manually is what you have to do right now. That's one of the things I'd really like to see kind of evolve in the future, is that to be a little more automated. It would be great if you could just click a button.
In the example you gave, Dustin, if the chatbot is embedded on a website and the website is already in a selected language, that's something that's actually working for a couple of years now. So that's not a big problem. So this way, and using, for example, your bot copy solution, that then the bot will just simply start talking in the right language immediately. What I just realized that there's one more thing we encounter if we're talking about international approach to bots, that in large chatbots you will also find in your country that there are also foreigners coming, and they are trying to be served in their language. In so far in such cases we only use the English here in our country. Let's say English is the language of first choice to talk with foreigners. But this is also that you have to be prepared for. So at least to recognize that somebody is speaking in a different language and give him a short answer that, well, this chatbot doesn't speak this language, and how can we help such person? So it's either to direct this person to a customer service which can help in this language, or give some other solution.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, Maciej, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and to learn more about what you guys are doing? And
sure.
Yeah.
So the name of our company is also our web address. So it's k2bots.ai.
Yeah.
K2 like the mountain, k2bots.ai. And so we are, to be very honest, we are in the process of translating our website to English, but then you will find contact to me. I will also put my my email here on the chat, so feel free to ask me any questions you still you didn't get chance to ask during our session. And like the guys invited you already, please join our, if you are only a Dialogflow developer or Dialogflow conversation designer, join our community and help us build this global community, because it's really a great thing and it's a great place to participate.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you so much for being with us. And I put a bunch of those questions in the Q&A section, and some of them are still in the chat. So feel free to interact with the attendees that are asking the questions.
Okay, I will spend my time here now to do that. Thank you very much for the opportunity of joining you here.
Yeah.
I will still be around.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Good seeing you.